So this kit came about because we had our thermal switches out for a handful of years now, and they're really popular. A lot of people use them in small block Chevy, big block Chevy, and LS applications using carburetors, or they don't want to use their ECUs to turn on their fan relays. Seeing as how those switches were so popular, we decided to just go ahead and package a dual fan relay kit, so that way it's a plug and play option for anybody wanting to install in their vehicle. I have it sitting right over here on the table. I'll show it to you now. So here we have our thermal dual relay kit. It makes plug and play for our thermal switch extremely simple. What we have here is the basic module. Inside the module you have 2 relays and 2 fuses with a master fuse for the incoming power. It is clearly marked, so that way when you have the cover off you can tell which fuse goes to where, which makes it very simple. It has a handful of wires coming off of it. All of the wires are clearly labeled. This is the 12 volt master power wire. You've got your fan number 1 wire, your fan number 2 wire, and then your switch, which already is pre-terminated to make life easy on you. And then an ignition source, a 12 volt ignition source that's for key on only power. With the thermal relay kit, you get 3 different sizes of eyelets given what you're going to be bolting it to for battery power, a PC heat shrink to cover it, a spare 30 amp fuse, and a spare 10 amp fuse, as well as 2 diagrams, one of which is simple instructions, just follow along, really easy. Part numbers for any of the thermal switches if you want to add it, if you don't already have it, and then a wiring diagram. I have all of the pieces already set out for pretty much what I need to install this thermal relay kit, and we're going to be using Deutsch connectors today on Steve's fan. It is our preferred method. These can also be purchased on Scram Speed's website. And we'll be using a 180 degree thermal switch, specifically for LS. Let's go ahead and get right to it. Step number 1 is we're going to be installing our relay module in Steve's car. The best spot to put the relay modules tends to be on the passenger side, somewhere on the core support or on the passenger side inner fender. Right now I'm thinking somewhere in here is where we're going to put Steve's fan module. Yes, we only use rivet nuts in our shop. We do not use self-tapping screws. So you can do it with a self-tapping screw, but this is the correct way. It looks much nicer. I will judge you. The mounting bracket is removable, and it makes the install very nice. Then you can just bolt it down and clip the relay module right onto it. Once you have the bracket bolted down, you can click the relay module directly on top. Like that. Now it is mounted. Now that we have our relay module mounted, the next step is to hook up the fan power and ground. We're going to go ahead and route this through Steve's engine bay, making it look as nice as we possibly can. And then we're going to attach the fan to fan 1 with a DTP2 Deutsch connector. It's what we use always in the shop for fan disconnects, and there is also a fan 2 wire here if you notice. The fan 2 wire will not be used because Steve only has 1 fan. However, we're going to heat shrink the ends of it up and just tuck it back so that way if in the future he wants to add one, the wires will still be there. When you're only doing 1 fan and not 2, you do need to make sure that you pull out the fan 2 fuse so that way power is not being fed to this when they're activated. And now we got to pull fan 2 fuse. Okay, now we're going to add the Deutsch connector. One side done. Okay, now we're going to undo Steve's current nasty connection. Don't need it anymore. So we're just going to cut it off right at the end. And now that side's done. So then we can plug in our two ends. I'm going to add some nylon P-clips to this harness just to kind of keep it in the spot that I like it at, about there. Now that we have the DTP2 connector on and the fan wired, we're going to go ahead and do the chassis ground. The chassis ground needs to be directly to the chassis ground, not to the body. Steve already happens to have a 1/4-20 rivet nut into his chassis from a previous install, and that's what we plan to use today. This is what we use to actually have fan ground, and this also controls the ground that's feeded to the thermal switch, but it's all in one convenient location. Now that we have the chassis ground done, the next step is to hook up the thermal switch connectors. Steve already has a thermal switch set in his engine because he's nice and drained his radiator already, so it's a simple plug-in. Switch wires just go directly onto the spades. One there, and one there. And the switch wires do have a high temp coating. This is not your normal nylon stuff. This can be very close to high heat without having any issues. So don't worry if it's close to the exhaust, just make sure it has an inch or so. Okay, so we're back here at Steve's relay panel, where we found an ignition accessory, which we're going to hook our ignition wire to. So when the car is on and the ignition is on, this will receive power, which will give power to our relays. Assuming that the thermal switch is closed, the fans will turn on. So we're going to go ahead and add a ring terminal to this and hook it up right here. Ignition wire is done. Now that we got the ignition source solved, the last thing to do is hook up the battery power. The battery power source is maybe 6 inches away from where we have our relay module mounted, so I am going to shorten it as we give you 7 foot of wire. Just loop it around, use one of the terminals included in the kit, and hook up battery power. Now that we have the battery power done, we are ready to test the unit. We're going to turn the key on, and an easy way to test it is just to ground out the thermal switch, which would turn it on, or you can put them together. That will turn the fans on to let you know that the system is entirely working. Another way to do it is you can simply heat cycle the car, wait for it to get up to operating temperature. If you see the fan come on, it's working. If it gets above the thermal switch temperature, it's not working. But we do recommend that you always test it by grounding it out to ensure that the installation was done properly. Now that we have the ignition on, we're just going to simply test the system by taking these two off and touching them together. Fan's working good. That means the system's installed properly. Hook the thermal switch back up, and the installation is done. So that wraps up the install of the thermal relay module on Steve's car. If he was to ever convert the car to EFI someday, the changeover is fairly simple, as the ignition wire would just be turned into an output on an ECU, and the thermal switch connections would be connected together. That would still retain full functionality of the module itself. If you have any more questions about this kit or interested in buying it, hit up scramspeed.com. Hope you enjoyed the video, and be sure to give us a like and subscribe. Thank you.